Maybe I should make a joke about Tom Blyth being in yet another romance with the messiest circumstances imaginable, but I haven't read that book yet. I'm going to, though.
Bit of foreplay, twinkle in the eye, the deed, pregnancy.
Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and on my channel I talk about entertainment media. Today I'm going to be reviewing the new romantic thriller, Plainclothes, starring Tom Blyth and Russell Tovey. Tom Blyth is, of course, best known for playing the younger version of Coriolanus Snow in the Hunger Games prequel film, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I'm actually recording this review in mid-August when I have just finished reading the original Hunger Games book trilogy for the first time, and then I'm going to now rewatch the film series to do a Patreon exclusive discussion of that, after which I will move on to Songbirds and Snakes. I haven't decided yet whether I will cover that film, the prequel, on YouTube or Patreon, but for now I will say that Tom was very good in that film. I've seen the film and not read the book yet, and he is similarly excellent in this new film, Plainclothes. His co-lead, or secondary lead, Russell Tovey, I would say I know him first and foremost for Being Human. It's been a while since I last watched that series, but nonetheless, that's always the first thing I think of whenever his name gets brought up. The Plainclothes premise is, in 1990s New York, an undercover police officer receives an assignment to lure and arrest gay men. However, he's surprised to discover a scintillating connection with one of his targets. As their secret connection deepens and internal pressure to deliver arrests intensifies, he finds himself torn between duty and desire. Now, any of my regular viewers will know that I'm not particularly fond of copaganda.
I'm glad we're not watching a cop show. Gotta stop mythologizing the police, for Christ's sake, come on.
So I will just make it clear from the beginning that I would not categorize this film, Plainclothes, as copaganda. It's quite the opposite. It's very clear in showing the police as predatorily going out of their way to try to entrap queer adult men. My pull quote is as follows: "A visceral leading performance by Tom Blyth and an impeccable cinematographic vision are at the forefront of why Plainclothes excels in emotional impact and conveying a hopeful queer resilience." A couple of points of clarification. The film is more or less entirely focusing on gay, white, cisgender men, but given the way that institutionalized legislative bigotry can impact a broader spectrum of the LGBTQ+ community, I'm using the word queer to describe things. Particularly since, technically speaking, there's not necessarily anything explicitly stated that clarifies whether or not any of the men that are being targeted in these missions are gay. For all we know, they could be bi or pan. Anyway, this review is going to have mild spoilers. Plainclothes has a really well-designed and well-executed visual style. You will have these different aspect ratios that further enhance that feeling of making it a period piece, but there are also instances of presenting footage in such a way that it's meant to be from the perspective of Tom Blyth's character Lucas, and at times that footage seems to appear as if it's meant to resemble what would be an old-fashioned body cam, which is peculiar for me to say simply because from doing a quick search online, police body cam technology wouldn't have been invented or widely used during the time period of Plainclothes. But when I saw this visual style for those bits of footage that are scattered throughout the film, it reminded me a lot of Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop, which was a film released in 1987. If you've seen that film and you are aware of how it commentates on the police, particularly the US police, as an evil institution, it goes about doing that in such a way that I couldn't help but watch Plainclothes and think of it in the sense of, if Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop had a closeted son, it would be Plainclothes. Lucas being in the police force and having to go on these missions where he's baiting queer men, most of whom are probably closeted or down low, in order to entrap them and bring the wrath of the US police force down upon them, he is undeniably having to turn off his humanity and empathy. The protagonist of RoboCop, Alex Murphy, he struggles to fully remember who he is or was because of this procedure that was done to transform him into RoboCop. It's more efficient and profitable for this megacorporation, OCP, if he's just an unquestioning, unfeeling machine. Lucas in Plainclothes is not being encouraged to empathize with the struggles of queer men trying to find connections in a culturally and legislatively bigoted country. He's only there to enforce the law. It doesn't matter to this larger institution whether or not that law is moral. The film isn't existing to villainize Lucas, but instead it's showing how suffocating it feels to have to be closeted in a general sense, but how much more intense and heightened this is for him because of his occupation and the specific jobs he's doing that are so directly entangled in this major part of who he really is. Tom Blyth is so convincing in conveying despair, fear, anxiety, all of these gut-wrenching emotions that come from being closeted, working this horrible, evil job, and just all of the panicking he does as a result of that. And normally I would avoid spoilers at all costs, especially major ones, but given the sensitivity a lot of queer viewers understandably have because of the bury your gays trope, I won't give away a bunch of plot spoilers, but I will say that no queer characters die in this movie. It is a thriller. There's a lot of tension, suspense, anxiety, all things to be expected in the thriller genre. But it's not a film that sets out to needlessly emotionally batter you, with no catharsis waiting at the end of that journey. This film is a love letter to this community, and you can really feel that it aims to leave viewers with a feeling of hope. Hope that things do in fact get better. As introduced by the written premise or the film's trailer, Lucas develops feelings for one of his targets, and that target's name is Andrew, played by Russell Tovey. Their chemistry delivers every bit of passion and heart that you would want them to have for this story. On the one hand, you're showing the most visceral spark and attraction that would lead you to pursue a quick and casual and very steamy hookup. But on the other hand, you have what amounts to a tragic love story. For as tempting as it might be for some to focus on the more steamy NSFW parts of their relationship arc, what I found to be the most standout part of their relationship were just the conversations they would have. Every meeting they have feels so fleeting that there's never a spare moment that can be wasted. You can think about how awful it is to not be able to live your authentic life out of the closet because of how difficult or even impossible it becomes to find a partner, be that for the casual or long-term connection and intimacy. But Plainclothes broadens the scope of that to also show how lonely it is to just not have a consistent support system and even platonic connections. Lucas's ex-girlfriend makes some appearances, and I was pleasantly surprised to find that I enjoyed watching his scenes with her more or less an equal amount to how I enjoyed his scenes with Andrew. She is either the first or one of the first people from his personal life that actually knows that he's not straight, and I just loved her so much and what she brought to the story and Lucas's journey. Now, because of the fact that Lucas is struggling with anxiety and you have all of this suspense and tension, I think it's absolutely essential to watch this film at least twice. They tend to jump around a fair bit to things that are happening for Lucas personally, professionally, an intersection of the two at different points in this specific period of his life. It's not presented in a perfectly neat sequential order. Now, it's not impossible to follow what's happening on a first watch, but there's definitely a much more clear understanding of what certain images or footage means if you've already seen the film at least once. I watched my press screener once to simply watch the film and experience it and to try to gauge what sort of feedback I would want to share. And then I watched my screener a second time to try to take more detailed notes about various plot details, memorable scenes or moments, and it was quite striking how many things in the first third or first half of the film take on a whole new meaning when you've already experienced the story in its entirety. The non-linear, non-sequential presentation of events is often formatted to where you will be jumping back in time to show you something that the most future version of Lucas is remembering in that moment. If you're struggling on a first watch to determine where you're at, Lucas has some facial hair and his hair is slightly more grown out when it's further on into the timeline of the story. I don't want to give away specifics since this is an early review, which only contains mild spoilers, but I do just want to say that I really like the film's ending. I have to because it makes sense narratively for that ending to be the culmination of everything you've already seen at these different parts of Lucas's journey. It's also just a very emotionally satisfying payoff. A well-executed ending is the final impression that the viewer walks away with, and that's definitely a major plus for Plainclothes. So if you want to watch something steamy, dramatic, thrilling, and queer, then you should watch Plainclothes.